It is now my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Bill Chong. Bill, as you know, is the Commissioner of the New York City Department of Youth and Community Development, and you've known him over his 25 years of service in this community in various arenas. We were talking just before the program about announcements that he's made in this very space relating to some issues that I suspect he's going to talk about today, so I'm not going to steal his thunder, except to observe that this is a person who has worked in the areas of after school, who has worked with the aging, who has worked with youth and community development, essentially for his entire professional life. You have his bio in his packet. I will not read it, except that I want to read the last line because it matters a lot to us here at Baruch College. A native New Yorker, Mr. Chong is the product of the public school system and of the City University of New York. I give you Bill Chong.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you, Claire and Luana. The Better Business Bureau does important work. The charity ratings that come out every November, December, I look at religiously because as a funder, when I was at DYCD the first time and when I was at the Department for the Aging, and now when I'm at DYCD now, I always look for what groups are not on the list because it troubles me. Because if we're going to invest public dollars, taxpayer dollars, it's important to know they meet the high standards that the Better Business Bureau has established. The Dean talked about sort of my special memories of this place. Over a decade ago, actually, October 2003, when I was the incoming Assistant Commissioner for Capacity Building, I've been on the job all of 2 weeks. And so the very first DYCD event I attended was here. It was a planning conference to announce the expansion of after-school programs to the tune of $60 million called Out of School Time. And were any people there? No one? One person, Diane. Okay, so we know life has come full circle because I just had a meeting yesterday with the mayor and the deputy mayor and the budget director, and we're about to issue a white paper announcing our plans to release a solicitation of $190 million to make after-school programs available in every city middle school in the city. $190 million. To give you a sense, we did $60 million. It took us 3 years. We have $190 million. We have to get out the door in 6 months. So. Stay tuned for the white paper. That's how my time has been consumed over the last, it's been 6 weeks. It seems like 6 months. But it's a good stress, as I tell my wife when I come home every day. It's good to be spending money doing good things. When I left DYCD in 2011 as the Deputy Commissioner, my last conversation with OMB, the Office of Management Budget, was how are you going to implement this 10th round of cuts? My second week on the job, I get a call from the same person at OMB saying, how much money do you need? So it was like going through, for those of you who are science fiction fans, it's like going through a wormhole and entering an alternative universe and saying, who the hell are you and what do you do with the real budget person? But new mayor, new priorities, and DYCD is very much at the center of the mayor's agenda. When the mayor announced me January 6th, I said that I believe DYCD's primary mission was to provide support to community-based organizations to help them provide the important services that are needed in our communities. And I came to that view for 2 reasons. One, my experience as a native New Yorker, and 2, as somebody who got his career started as a community organizer. So let me talk a little bit about these experiences and how they've shaped my view of where I think DYCD should head. My parents came to this country in the 1940s, and I came on the scene in the late 50s. We were the only Chinese family, and we lived in East New York, Brooklyn, which at the time was an Italian Jewish neighborhood, which eventually became an African-American neighborhood. We moved to Bensonhurst, which was an Italian neighborhood at the time. We moved to Midwood, which was a Jewish neighborhood at the time. And I've lived in Bed-Stuy when it was mostly an African-American neighborhood, and I've lived in Boerum Hill, Soho, and the financial district when they were affordable. And through all the change, and I now live in Forest Hills, which is probably the last place I can afford to live. And through all the changes, the demographic changes, what has been a constant in my experience, has been the important role that community groups have played. Some groups adapt to the changing demographics and continue to thrive. Others become irrelevant and they move on, and new groups emerge. As far as my experience in public service, a decision I made 33 years ago to volunteer with a group at the time called Asian Americans for Equality in Chinatown, a pretty radical group, very grassroots, no government funding, no funding at all. It was organized around, initially in the 70s, getting construction jobs for Chinese and minority workers when they built Confucius Plaza. So when I was all 23 or 24 at the time, it was in the midst of a fight against the Koch administration that was trying to gentrify the community with a rezoning called the Special Manhattan Bridge District that would have allowed for luxury high-rises in Chinatown. And of course, I was appalled, because Chinatown at the time was overwhelmingly a poor neighborhood with garment workers and restaurant workers. And I tell this story. The woman I work for, Lillian Barris Pioli, who many of you probably know, who's Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, I joke that she got her start working for the Koch administration in public service. I got my start suing the Koch administration. 33 years later, we're working for perhaps the most progressive mayor in the city's history, and it's rewarding. And so my experience as AFI had helped shape for me a couple of key lessons. One is the importance of small neighborhood groups, that they play a vital role in the life of the city, and that we need to figure out how to work with them. Two is small groups can grow into big groups, and AFI today now is probably the largest provider of housing services in the Asian community in the city, if not in the country. And the third thing is the importance that we figure out how to better use public dollars so we take a neighborhood perspective of communities. So let me talk about my three main goals. Well, my most immediate goal, obviously, is try to get the $190 million out the door. But where do I want to see DYCD in 4 years? That's sort of what I want to talk about, and then I'll gladly take questions. The first goal is creating a space for small groups. I think it's important. I learned a lot when I worked for 5 years at the Citizens Committee for New York City. Anyone there from here? No? Okay. They work with 30,000 grassroots groups, tenant associations, community garden groups, civilian patrols. They do incredible work with no money. And they're all comprised of neighborhood residents who have the ultimate stake in that neighborhood. The second goal, and I'll go back and talk a little bit about each of these. The second goal is moving towards program integration. DYCD, while a small agency of about $400 million, has a big footprint in many, many needy neighborhoods, but we don't maximize those resources. And the third focus is revisiting quality and how to measure quality. So as far as small groups, I think there are a few things that we're doing that will help create a space for small groups. I spoke to somebody who gets a small $3,500 council contract through DYCD. And the paperwork to do a $3,500 contract is this thick. So, I mean, there are discussions going on between the mayor's office and the speaker's office about how to streamline the discretionary process, so I'll leave that to them. But I think the city is looking for ways to streamline its procurement process. Some of you might have heard of HHS Accelerator. Show of hands, people know what that is? Okay. So part of the goal is to simplify the process, not ask for duplicate paperwork. And what the most exciting thing about this, it's an online procurement system, is that it will, in some procurements, not all, make it move towards an application-like form. So it'll be a set number of questions. It might be 12 to 15 pages. DYCD is legendary for issuing 400 pages solicitations. I mean, legendary. Phone books. And sometimes you can't avoid it because if you have multiple types of services in the same procurement, if you're asking for senior services and literacy, and you have to have a robust document. But if you're just procuring one type of service, like after school, then you can simplify it so that the local neighborhood youth group that maybe doesn't have a proposal writer on staff, and the executive director writes the proposals, will have a meaningful opportunity to compete if it's a 12-page application. The other way I think small groups can play a role in the life of DYCD, and this is something the mayor talked about in a report that he issued when he was public advocate, was looking for ways for these small local groups to subcontract with some of the larger groups. So one of the things I am doing is I'm hiring a director of community outreach and partnerships whose job will be to work with primarily our beacons, which are the school-based community centers started in the Dinkins administration, and the cornerstones, which are essentially beacon-like programs but better funded, located in public housing, to begin to map the city and look where we have strong capacity and a cluster of local groups, and encourage either subcontracts, if there's money, or what's called co-location. A lot of the beacons and cornerstones have free space, whether it's free space in the community center or free space at the school, and for these programs to be part of that continuum of services. So for example, a lot of community garden groups are out there doing wonderful work, making their neighborhoods more livable. They work with young people. Why can't they work with the young people who are enrolled in a beacon program or a cornerstone and beautify that neighborhood? I mean, the voluntary sector and the nonprofit sector are like ships in the night. The groups we fund often stop operating at 6 or 7. The groups that are voluntary operate from 7 on or on weekends, and they don't really work together. So that's some ideas of how I want to create a space for small groups. Program integration has been a pet peeve of mine since I was assistant commissioner of capacity building 10 years ago, and I had asked for a computer printout of where does DYC invest its money. And what didn't surprise me was that there are like 10, 15, 20 neighborhoods where 80% of our money goes, because it's all driven by need. But the groups that we fund don't talk to each other. I mean, one clear example, our assistant commissioner for beacons and cornerstones told me this story about a couple of years ago when there was a gang incident in East New York, and between the Blood and the Crips. And so the beacon was in the Blood territory and the cornerstone was in the Crip territory. They didn't talk to each other. He had to force a meeting to talk about how they could address this issue. And part of this is, I think there's been a culture at DYCD, and culture in government in general, of siloed thinking, where depending on the funding source, we just look at, and we're very good at holding people accountable to the contractual obligations of the funding source, whether it's Workforce Investment Act money or runaway homeless youth money. We're very good at that, and that's something we should continue. But we need to create a culture of synergy and communication and cooperation among the groups we fund, so that when we look at our footprint and we figure, I want, and this is another change, I'll be bringing on a deputy commissioner, a new position, deputy commissioner for planning, program integration, and evaluation. And this person's job will be to step back from the implementation function that we focus on and look at the planning function, look at what neighborhoods our footprint is in, how can we create synergy. Simple things, doesn't cost money. If you have, and the example I've given is, we have a program, in-school youth program, a work readiness program for high school youth. If their parent needs adult literacy services, and there's an adult literacy program funded by our community development side of the agency, well, maybe they can refer them because they're a block away. Sharing clients, begin to look at which client we touch multiple times. We have the databases, they don't talk to each other. So part of what my goal is in 4 years is to sort of DYCD to be greater than the sum of its parts. How do we leverage the $400, $600 million we have? And how do we, I haven't said this to Nancy Waxing yet, but she'll love to hear it. How does DYCD become the settlement house for New York City neighborhoods? That's my vision of where to take the agency. And now, will it work in every neighborhood? Probably not, because we need what I call the intersection of the 3 highs: high need, high investment, and high capacity. And capacity is probably the toughest piece, because oftentimes in some of the neediest neighborhoods, the capacity of the groups is not the greatest. You know, the example I always hear is East New York. We have a great summer youth employment program run by the Italian American Civil Rights League in East New York. And Councilman Charles Barron would always say, can't you find a black group? And we said, there aren't any good. Now, the good thing about the Italian American Civil Rights League, even though it's still run by, I think, a couple of older Italian-American women. The entire staff is all African-American. They run a great program, and it's culturally competent and it's quality services. But if it wasn't for them, there would be nobody else to run the summer youth employment program there. So unfortunately, there's a disconnect in the neediest neighborhoods between capacity and services that are needed. So that's something, hopefully, we'll get some more money in capacity building because of the $190 million in the expansion, that we can begin to address this issue. And the third goal is revisiting quality. One of the mistakes I think we made in the past was we had a director of evaluation, and she was laid off in a layoff 4 or 5 years ago. And I think as we go to scale on several programs, our Cornerstone program just increased from 25 locations to another 45 to 70. So pretty much every large public housing authority center is now run by a DYCD funded program. So we've gone to scale there. There's about, I think, 25 centers that were deemed too small to operate a robust program. We're about to go to scale on the middle school, after school programs, where the goal by this September is to have a program at every single middle school in the city of New York, doubling the number of young people. And the white paper hopefully will be out this week or early next week, which will spell out the details of this plan. And then our young adult internship program, which is our job readiness program for job-ready disconnected youth, is in the third and final year of evaluation. And so that's probably ready to go to scale. So when we go to scale, what worries me is the impact on quality. And so I think we need to sort of beef up our capacity in evaluation, and so we can better track quality. And there's that piece of it, and the other piece, and I'll end and take questions, is we need to invest in frontline workers, because ultimately, and to kind of circle back with, we're talking about the central role of nonprofits, the supporting nonprofits for DYCD, where the rubber hits the road for DYCD is the program managers who go out there and visit the programs and monitor quality. And we have had a disconnect in the previous years, and so our out-of-school time program, for example, the average number of contracts that a program manager has is 33. That's way too many. You can't do the necessary site visits to make sure quality is assured. You can't do the coaching and the technical assistance that's needed. So one of my goals, aside from staffing up in some of these key areas, is to find enough resources in-house to reduce the contract load for program staff in the out-of-school time program, so that is a reasonable number, so they can spend quality time with the programs that we fund. Because it serves no one to just allow programs to operate and they don't provide quality services. Let me just say in this way is that, and looking at my life and the decision I made to work with Asian Americans for Equality 33 years ago, I think my life has come full circle. Starting with a grassroots organization, now overseeing a government agency that helps neighborhood organizations. And I say full circle, but actually, I don't think any of us want to say we've been running around in circles in life. It's an upward spiral that I've been able to learn and build on every set of experiences that I've been through to make the best possible decisions as commissioner at DYCD. So I'd be glad to take questions. People? Okay. Okay, limited resources. Well, actually, can people just read them aloud? I'd like to see who said them. Because, so I always have to have a conversation with people. I don't want to just... So who will ask that question? You have a...
Okay, first question. As a DYCD vendor, I think DYCD could play a major role in sharing best practices among vendors. Is it possible to share performance data among vendors and invite those who are high performing in certain areas to discuss their best practices?
Oh, okay. Who asked that question, by the way? And what group are you with? Strive, okay. I mean, I think, I believe in peer education. I mean, there's one provider who I won't mention who has 40 after-school programs. And we had this discussion actually with the staff at City Hall about what constitutes quality. And this one provider which had 40 after-school programs, and they had the same cost per participant of $2,100 for a middle school. The quality varied from site to site, and we couldn't. So it wasn't money because they got the same money per site, and so it had to be who the program director was. And I said to the staff, I said, can't they convene all 40 and have the people who are doing really well talk to the people who are not really doing well so they can sort of teach each other? I think we can replicate that on a citywide scale because people learn from their peers much more than from a workshop because they've walked in the same shoes, they understand the needs, and they can maybe share tips. Sharing performance information, I'm not sure we can do that because, I mean, Vendex ratings, I think, which is the city rating system for contracts, I think is public information, but that's a legal question that I want to look into. But certainly, sharing best practices is something that I encourage. In fact, tomorrow, I've asked the After School Corporation to come in and do a presentation for about 20 key providers to talk about their new after-school model, which is more of a tutoring component to see it's enhanced learning, to see whether this is something that the field can embrace. So I think the more we talk to each other, the better.
That leads to our next question. How do you begin to address the issue of silos within a community, engage organizations that would benefit from working together?
Okay, who asked that question? And where are you from?
My name is Brian. I'm with the Council of Community Services.
Okay. I think this is a problem that most government agencies face. In fact, when I raised this with the mayor, the first question he asked is, how much does it cost? And I said nothing, which my staff told me it was a big mistake. But I said, he's giving us $190 million. I'm not going to be greedy here, because it's not about money. It's about a different way of doing business. So I think it's about starting at the top levels of DYCD, so that the Deputy Commissioner for Community Development, who's Suzanne Lin, who many of you know, and the soon-to-be-announced Deputy Commissioner for Youth Services, which is a position I held for 6.5 years, sit down along with the Deputy Commissioner for Program Integration to figure out, okay, where do we invest? Because the decisions have been made independently, and usually it's about need. It's either poverty or number of young people, but usually where DYCD invests money and most government funders do this, is where's the greatest need? And so we want to look at the three highs: high need, high investment, and high capacity, and then maybe pilot something in a few communities. I know Phipps neighborhood, I think they renamed themselves, and the Children's Aid Society have started this kind of discussion in Morrisania, and there are other agencies that are doing this already on their own without government involvement. So I want to learn from their experiences to see how we can do this. But eventually my goal is to start it in a few neighborhoods with the DYCD funded programs. But I spoke to the deputy mayor. There's no reason why we can't bring in ACS and HRA. But I want to get our house in order first before we start bringing in other agencies.
Okay, we have probably more questions than we have time to answer them, and I'll give you all the questions. But how about, can we develop e-STEAM programs in public housing as part of the out-of-school time funding?
What kind of programs?
E-STEAM, e-STEAM?
Okay, who asked that question? Oh, STEM.
The e-STEAM, Starita Voice of MSP Philanthropy Advisors. e-STEAM is done in Canada and Finland, and it's entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
Right.
And it starts at the pre-K level. And so my question is, I know you're looking at bringing together existing programs.
Right.
But what about bringing in something that we currently are not doing with our children in New York City?
I mean, if you see me afterwards, I can connect you to the assistant commissioner who's overseeing Cornerstones and Beacons, and we always have regular provider meetings. So if you're interested in doing a presentation about this program, if it's something that they have the resources to fund as a subcontractor, they can do it, or maybe it's something that can be piloted with private funding. So you can see me afterwards. I mean, I think people who live in public housing are starved for services. The Cornerstone model was based on the Beacon program, and they're better funded, although I've been told they don't feel that they're better funded, but they're certainly better funded than the Beacons, because the Beacons have not been funded well in the last 20 years. They're a stepchild of 2 mayors, so that's year 2 goal. Come see me afterwards, and I'll connect you with Darryl Rattray.
Okay, I think maybe time for one last question, Commissioner. If DYCD supports CBOs, will DYCD allow after-school programs to pay for facility cost, i.e. rent, for programs outside public schools?
Okay, who asked that question? So is this off-site programming?
Yeah, I'm from Boys and Girls Harbor in El Barrio,
Right.
and in East Harlem.
And we have about 30 or 40 different schools. So we have about 240 children in the after-school program, so 30 or 40 different schools. And we do see a value of bringing kids who are from different schools together, because in real life that's what happens. But the DYCD contract does not allow you to put any of your rent into the contract. So that's
Is it the rent for the public school? Because there shouldn't be any rent in the public school.
No, we're a private organization.
But, your central rent?
Yes.
Oh, but there's 10% indirect in each contract, which I understood can be part of that. You want more than 10%. Sorry. Any funder will tell you, they want their dollars to go as much to direct services as possible. So I think, 10% is the limit. To give you a contrast, when we're planning the expansion of the middle school programs, we're getting 8%. So to cover our costs. So I hear what you're saying. Having worked in nonprofits, the hardest money to raise is the indirect cost, because no funder wants to pay for the rent and the lights, but it's essential. That's unfortunately the nature, I think, of funders. Any other questions, or that's it? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Really, really thrilled that you could be with us today. I know that with this new position, you're extremely busy, so we really appreciate it. And again, we really appreciate you recognizing the value of the work of the BBB and of the 20 Standards of Charity Accountability, so thank you very much. I also want to thank Dean Birdsell. Excellent remarks. Thank you, as always.